Have you ever looked at a woman over 50 who lives alone and thought, she must be lonely? It's a common thought. But what if I told you that woman isn't lonely at all? She's powerful, she's intentional, she's made a choice that few are brave enough to make, to choose peace over pressure, wholeness over waiting. For generations, we were taught that partnership was the prize, and solitude was something to pity. But the real story? It's so much deeper, and today we're pulling back the curtain on it. If you've ever wondered what it truly looks like when a woman stops chasing approval and starts choosing herself, let me introduce you to Diane. Have you ever looked at a woman over 50 who lives alone and thought, she must be lonely? Or maybe you've quietly wondered, why isn't she dating? Doesn't she want companionship? It's a natural thought. After all, for generations, we were taught that partnership was the prize and solitude was something to pity. But here's the part we don't talk about enough. Those quiet assumptions often miss the deeper, truer story. Because these women, they aren't lonely, they're powerful, they're intentional, and they've made a choice that many wouldn't dare to choose peace over pressure. If you've ever wondered what that journey really looks like, let me introduce you to Diane. Diane is a 63-year-old retired nurse who spent most of her life putting everyone else first. After a string of half-hearted dates and years of emotional exhaustion, she had a moment of clarity that changed everything. I don't want to be picked by someone who barely sees me, she said. I want to be chosen by someone who truly values me, or not at all. That was the day she stopped chasing approval, and for the first time in years, she felt free. Today, we're diving into the real reasons why more and more women over 50 are choosing to live alone, and why that choice isn't rooted in fear or failure, but in growth, wisdom, and self-respect. If anything in this video speaks to you, comment yes below or share your thoughts. I read every comment. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell. This channel is for your voice, your power, and your next chapter. Because this video isn't about being alone, it's about finally coming home to yourself. And as we peel back more layers, we start to see a bigger story unfolding, a story that challenges everything we've been told about women, love, and fulfillment. For decades, society sold women a single story. That partnership is the goal, the prize, the purpose. That to be single past a certain age, especially past 50, must mean something went wrong. Maybe you were too picky, maybe you couldn't keep a man, maybe you just gave up. But here's what no one tells you. That story, it's not just outdated, it's unraveling, and women over 50 are the ones pulling the thread. These women aren't running from love. They're stepping out of scripts that no longer fit. They're not trying to prove their worth through a partner. They've lived enough life to know their worth already, and that changes everything. Look at Carol, 56, who once believed the lie that if she didn't marry by 30, she'd miss her chance at happiness. She did get married twice, and both times she lost. More of herself trying to make the relationship work. After her second divorce, she didn't rush back out to date. She took a year to herself. No apps, no swipes, just quiet mornings, long walks, and asking herself a question she'd never truly asked before. What do I want? Without the pressure to be chosen. Now she says she's in the healthiest relationship of her life, with herself, and from that place of inner clarity, she's no longer afraid of being alone. In fact, she's careful about who she lets in. This is the new narrative. Women over 50 are writing. They're not bitter, they're boundary-wise, they're not too picky. They're finally clear on what no longer serves them. They're not afraid of being alone. They're afraid of being in the wrong company and losing themselves again. They no longer crave a relationship that completes them. They crave one that respects their wholeness. If you're nodding along, or you've felt this shift inside you, comment clarity over convention below. Let's give voice to the women who are rewriting the rules not out of rebellion, but out of wisdom. Because when a woman stops chasing love and starts choosing alignment, she becomes unstoppable. This begs the question, what truly inspires a woman over 50 to embrace a life that prioritizes peace and self-respect? So why would a woman over 50 choose to live alone? Not because she's given up on love, not because she's angry, and definitely not because she's hard to please. It's because she's done the inner work. She's come home to herself. Women who choose this path don't do it on a whim. It's a decision forged through years of self-sacrifice, emotional labor, and waking up to the realization that their needs, their joy, and their energy deserve more than bare minimum love. Let's talk about 6 powerful reasons why she chooses this path, and why, for many, it's the most soul-honoring choice they've ever made. It often begins with a powerful realization. She's simply done being everyone's anchor. She raised children. She supported partners. She held families together through storms. But now, she wants to be her own anchor. Peace is no longer optional. It's essential. I used to be the first call in every crisis, says Melanie, 61. Now I protect my peace like it's my job. But reclaiming her peace is only part of the story. Along the way, she's also healed through heartbreak. She's been lied to, let down, and left unseen. But instead of letting it harden her, it refined her. She stopped asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and started asking, "Why did I accept so little?" This healing leads her to crave something much deeper than surface-level connections. She craves authenticity over attention. She's no longer impressed by charm without character. She listens more to actions than words. And that means a lot of. People no longer make it past her front door, and that's okay. And as she releases the need for shallow validation, another shift happens. She becomes self-sourced. The old story said, "Find someone to complete you." Her story now says, "Be so whole, love can only enhance, not fix." Practical tool. She builds her days around her own rhythm. Morning walks, quiet journaling, nourishing meals, not waiting for someone to give her a reason to enjoy life. From there, her standards for connection rise even higher. She honors presence over performance. She doesn't need fireworks, she needs eye contact, real conversation. A partner who shows up, not just checks in. If that's not available, she'd rather be in her own company. Above all, her loyalty shifts, no longer to staying in something comfortable, but to her own growth. She's loyal to her growth. If a relationship threatens her evolution, she'll walk away, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. I'd rather walk alone in truth than stay with someone who confuses my silence with weakness, says Bernice, 59. And here's the most important thing to remember. This isn't bitterness, it's discernment. This isn't giving up, it's leveling up. If you relate, comment below. Growth over guessing. Let's make space for this powerful new chapter. To bring this idea to life even more clearly, let's look at a real-world example of how choosing growth changes everything. Lisa's story is a beautiful reflection of this powerful shift. Lisa is 58. She lives alone in a small, sunlit home at the edge of a quiet town. The shelves are stacked with well-loved books. There's chamomile tea in the cupboard, wind chimes on the porch, and a golden retriever named Harley who never leaves her side. But her peace, it was earned, not given. 10 years ago, Lisa's marriage of 22 years came to an end, not with a bang, but with a long, slow erosion. She spent the last 7 years of it trying to patch cracks that kept spreading. She read the books, went to counseling, softened. Her voice swallowed her needs. She kept hoping that if she tried just a little harder, he'd finally meet her halfway, but he never did. One day I realized I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a performance, she says. The final turning point wasn't a betrayal. It was something quieter, an evening where she sat across from him, talking, and realized he hadn't asked her a single question about her day, her work, or her thoughts in over a month. She felt like furniture, present, useful, but invisible. After the divorce, she didn't rush into anything. She didn't download dating apps or sign up for singles events. She signed up for herself. She started therapy, picked up yoga, reignited her love for watercolor painting. Slowly, she built a life that didn't orbit around being chosen, but around feeling centered. These days, Lisa walks Harley at sunrise, barefoot in the grass, coffee in hand. She books solo getaways to places she used to dream about. She cooks dinner, by candlelight for one, and enjoys every bite. She still believes in love, but not in sacrificing herself to feel it. I used to think love meant compromise, she says. Now I know it means compatibility. And if I have to disappear to keep someone, they're not mine to keep. Lisa is open to love, but only the kind that meets her where she already is, whole, present, and deeply grounded. And she's not waiting. She's living. If Lisa's story resonates with you, share your moment of clarity in the comments. When did you realize your peace mattered more than approval? Lisa's journey shows that solitude is more than just living alone. It's about returning home to yourself. And this leads us to something even deeper. The psychology behind why solitude feels so sacred. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for many women over 50 who live alone, that's exactly what's happening. Not as a retreat, but as a return. They're not isolating, they're individuating, and that distinction changes everything. Individuation is the process of integrating every part of yourself, the light, the dark, the wounds, the wisdom, into one whole sovereign identity. It's the journey from people-pleasing to presence, from silence to self-expression. For women who've spent decades caring for others, molding themselves to be liked, staying small to keep the peace, solitude becomes more than stillness. It becomes sacred space for transformation. Take Andrea, 62, who spent most of her life bending herself to fit everyone else's expectations. Her parents, her church, her ex-husband, even her kids. She never realized how much of her identity was shaped around being needed. But once the house was empty, the marriage ended, and the distractions faded. She was left with one quiet, powerful question. Who am I when no one's watching? That question scared her, but it also liberated her. She started journaling. She walked every evening without her phone. She explored memories she had long buried. She faced the guilt she felt for saying no. She reconnected with the dreams she gave up at 28, and slowly she built a life not based on performance, but on presence. Her solitude became her sanctuary, not because it was quiet, but because it was honest. This is what makes women who live alone so emotionally magnetic. They're not avoiding the world, they're becoming deeply rooted in it, on their own terms. Practical reflection. Try this. One morning a week, spend the first hour in silence. No phone, no to-do list. Just journal. The question, what part of me have I been hiding to stay accepted? These women aren't running from intimacy, they're redefining it, starting within, and when you meet a woman who's done this kind of inner work, you'll feel it. Her presence fills the room, not because she's loud, but because she no longer shrinks. Let me know if this resonates. Drop "rooted woman" in the comments if you've ever felt this quiet awakening. Still, the world doesn't always celebrate a woman who chooses herself. In fact, many don't understand it, and sometimes they judge it harshly. Yes, people judge her. They call her too picky, cold, bitter, or damaged. They ask her what happened to her, as if peace must be earned through pleasing others, as if living alone must mean something went wrong. But the truth, she's not broken. She's just finally refusing to negotiate her worth. That kind of clarity, it makes people uncomfortable, especially in a world that teaches women to measure their value by how accommodating, available, and agreeable they are. When a woman steps out of that box, when she stops performing for approval, it sends a ripple through the room. Not because she's being difficult, but because she's being authentic. Let's be honest, for years she bent. She tolerated things she outgrew. She dimmed her light to be digestible. She said yes when she wanted to scream no. And then one day, she stopped. I used to keep quiet. To keep the peace, says Alana, 57. Now I protect my peace by no longer keeping quiet. That inner shift confuses people, especially those who only knew her when she was over-giving, over-explaining, or over-apologizing. So yes, the judgment comes, but it doesn't sting like it used to. Because when a woman is secure in herself, she no longer reacts to outside noise. She's no longer afraid of being misunderstood by people who never took the time to understand her in the first place. And to be clear, she's not anti-relationship. She's anti-self-abandonment. Psychology insight. Research shows that women who maintain strong boundaries in midlife experience higher levels of self-esteem and lower levels of anxiety, especially when they've previously lived in codependent patterns. So if someone calls her hard to love, what they often mean is she's no longer easy to control. And that for some feels threatening, but for her, it feels like freedom. Community prompt. Have you ever been labeled for simply choosing yourself? Share your story in the comments, and if this resonates, type peace over performance to join the conversation. Because women like her aren't cold, they're clear, and clarity is her new superpower. But there's an even greater transformation. That happens when a woman finally stops living for approval and starts living for herself. She doesn't seek approval anymore. Not because she's jaded, but because she's grown. She's not trying to be liked. She's choosing to be real. This woman has spent decades silencing her intuition to keep others comfortable. She's smiled through disappointment, minimized her needs, and tolerated things. She wouldn't wish on her daughter, but something shifted, a quiet, powerful awakening, and now she listens when her body tenses. She pays attention when her energy dips. She trusts her gut, because she knows it's been right all along. She doesn't slam doors. She doesn't throw scenes. She simply walks away from what no longer serves her, because the most dangerous woman is the one who no longer fears being misunderstood. Take Camille, 60. For years, she stayed in a relationship that looked perfect from the outside, but felt hollow on the inside. She kept telling herself, "At least he's here." Until one day, she asked herself a harder question. But am I? Now she has a new mantra. If it costs my peace, it's too expensive. She still desires connection. She's human. She still craves touch, companionship, laughter shared over dinner, but what she won't do is shrink herself to get it. I used to equate love with effort, Camille says. Now I equate it with ease. That doesn't mean she avoids hard conversations. It means she doesn't beg for basic emotional presence. She doesn't mistake breadcrumbs for a feast. She doesn't confuse consistency with chemistry. And she doesn't trade solitude for shallow connection. Practical insight. One of the most empowering questions she now asks before entering any connection is, does this feel like freedom, or does this feel like a performance? If it's the latter, she already knows her answer. This kind of self-knowledge, it's magnetic. It unsettles those who rely on confusion to maintain control, but it inspires those who are ready to live with intention. Community CTA. If you've ever made a decision that felt right, even when it scared others, comment clarity first. Let's normalize women choosing themselves without apology, because the woman who knows herself is no longer waiting to be chosen. She's doing the choosing, and that's exactly what makes her so powerful. So now it's your turn. Maybe you're a woman in your 50s, 60s, or beyond who's chosen to live alone, or is thinking about it. Maybe you felt judged, pitied, or misunderstood for that decision. Or maybe you're just beginning to ask the question, What would my life look like if I stopped chasing approval and started choosing alignment? Whatever brought you here, hear this. You're not alone. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're becoming. This path of solitude. It's not about isolation. It's about redefinition. You're redefining love, not as something to be begged for, but something to be invited into a life that's already full. You're redefining worth, not as something someone else confirms, but something that rises from within you, steady and unquestioned. You're redefining power, not as force, but as presence, the power to walk away, to protect your peace, to no longer apologize for your clarity. I used to think being alone was a punishment, says Teresa, 64. Now I see it as a privilege. It gave me back to myself. And if you're someone who loves a woman like this, pause before trying to fix, rescue, or label her. Instead, ask yourself, do I truly see her? Because she doesn't need fixing. She needs space. She needs respect. She needs truth. Practical. Takeaway. Whether you're just beginning this journey or decades into it, build a sacred space in your day that's just for you. 10 minutes of quiet, a journal, a walk without your phone, a question to reflect on. Where have I been shrinking? To be accepted, let's stop asking women why they live alone and start asking what it's taken for them to stand so whole. Community reflection. If this message spoke to you, comment below with "I choose wholeness" or share your story. When did you finally realize that being alone could be your most honest form of love? And if you found strength, validation, or even just a breath of relief in this video, subscribe. This space is for you, not to be fixed, but to be seen, heard, and reminded of your worth, because the love that matters most is the love you build within.